My son took my Christmas dinner chair, calling me useless, so I took back my whole house. Christmas Eve, the house lit up like a postcard oak table I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago, cinnamon-scented candles. I thought tonight would be family again. But as I sat down at the table, Ethan took my chair, raised his glass, and said loudly, "Dad, you're old and useless. Go to a nursing home. Let times us times take care of it." The room froze. I put down my napkin, looked at him straight in the eye. "Thank you for pointing out the problem." I put on my coat and walked out into the cold. The next morning, I returned with a locksmith and 2 porters. The door opened. I handed over the paperwork. "This house is in one time's name, not mine." He turned pale and growled. "I wouldn't dare." I replied, slowly as if hammering a nail. "Last night, you called me useless. Now, look, I'm so useful. I've wiped your life out of times, my house, asterisk. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? I used to think Christmas lights could make anything look whole again. A house, a family, a man. All it took was the right warmth of yellow and a few strings looped neatly along the eaves. On Christmas Eve, my house looked almost perfect, like something printed on the front of a real estate postcard. The garlands were fresh pine. The candles flickered in glass jars my wife had once chosen. The scent was cinnamon and clove and the memory of her. I had spent the morning fussing with the old decorations, hanging them exactly the way she used to, down to the crooked angel on top of the tree. That angel had been our inside joke for years. She always tilted slightly left, no matter how often we fixed her. Just like us, my wife used to laugh. Now she tilted there alone, defiant against symmetry. By 6 o'clock, the house glowed, the furnace hummed, the clock ticked steady and smug. I poured myself a glass of the same bourbon I always did, leaned against the doorframe of the dining room, and looked at the table I had built with my own hands. 40 years ago, I'd planed and stained that oak, sanding it smooth, while Ethan, still boy, sat nearby drawing trucks in crayon. Back then, the table was a promise, a place to gather, not a stage. The front door opened without a knock. "We're early." Claire's voice ran through the hall like the opening note of a commercial jingle bright, controlled, already claiming the air. She appeared in a cloud of perfume and planning, arms full of ribbon and wrapped boxes. "Hope that's okay," she said, setting her tote down and scanning the room. "We'll just do a few quick adjustments." She said, "we," but Ethan wasn't even through the door yet. "Be careful, Claire," I said as she eyed the living room furniture. "Old Bessie doesn't like being moved." She smiled, warm in tone, cold in eyes. "Just a little, Arthur. It doesn't fit with my modern Christmas theme this year." My modern Christmas theme. The phrasing had the neatness of a label. She tugged my leather chair away from its place. By the fireplace, the chair I'd read in, napped in, lived in, and pushed it toward the corner. Its legs groaned across the hardwood I'd refinished last spring. By the time Ethan walked in, the room already looked different. "Hey, Dad," he said, brushing my shoulder instead of hugging me. He wore a turtleneck the color of money, and that easy grim people in sales learn from seminars. "Big night, huh?" "For who?" I asked, not unkindly. "For all of us," he said, looking around like an auctioneer surveying potential. Within minutes, they began to occupy the house the way water fills a crack, quietly at first, then completely. Claire adjusted the lamp, moved the photo frame, replaced the plaid runner with a sleek white one. Ethan swapped my old jazz playlist for a Spotify mix called Christmas Modern Lux. He nodded approvingly as brass horns replaced Bing Crosby. "Better?" he said. I said nothing. Neighbors trickled in, people who remembered my name, but not what I used to do. Claire greeted each one with that effortless charm of hers. Ethan opened the wine with a flourish. "Beautiful bottle," someone said, admiring the label. "This must have cost a fortune." Ethan laughed, patting his friend on the back. "You've got to reward yourself after a long year. Nobody gives you anything for free." I watched the dark red pour into the glass and felt something shift, quiet but deep. That was the same Barolo I tucked into the Christmas box I'd sent him last week, along with the tart pan and his mother's handwritten recipe for pecan pie. He'd thanked me with a thumbs up emoji. Now he drank it like it was self-made. Dinner came next. The table shimmered. Candles, rosemary, silver polished to mirror. Claire's friends admire her aesthetic. Ethan carved the rose with confident precision, the way he does everything now, performative, assured, for an audience. Dad, he called from the head of the table, grab yourself a seat. Dinner's ready. I walked to my usual chair, the one at the far end near the window. The one I sat in every Christmas since Reagan was president. Ethan was already in it. Ethan, I said lightly, the way you test the beam with your hand before you cross. That's my chair. He looked up, smiling like I was joking. Come on, Dad. Sit over there. This seat's for the host. Dad is the landlord, I said quietly. His smile faltered. Dad only owns it on paper, he said, taking a sip. I'm the one who actually runs this place. You just sit here all day doing nothing. Is Reedman? He glanced toward the guests, waiting for a chuckle. None came, so he filled the silence himself. Useless, he said, the word light but landing heavy. You know what people do with useless things? They put them in nursing homes. Maybe it's time you thought about that. The words didn't hit like a slap. They settled like dust, slow, visible, everywhere. No one said a thing. The laughter of a moment ago froze midair. Claire's smile turned into porcelain. The neighbor I'd helped fix his roof last month studied his turkey. His wife reached for the salt like she was on television. The house itself seemed to hold its breath. Ethan looked down at his plate, then up again, maybe realizing he'd gone too far. But the damage was architectural. You don't patch a crack like that, you rebuild the foundation, or you watch the house fall. I didn't shout. I didn't scold. My voice, when it came, was level, almost kind. Thank you, I said. Excuse me. And leave Ivor and the note end. I stood, smoothed the napkin beside my plate, and walked to the hallway. My coat hung on the same peg it always had. I slid it on. It still smelled faintly of cedar and winter air. I reached for my gloves, the left one torn at the thumb. For a long moment, I waited for someone to say, Dad, or Arthur, or even, don't go. But all I heard was the quiet rearrangement of silverware and the low hum of a house pretending nothing had happened. I opened the front door. The cold rushed in, sharp and cleansing. Across the street, the Jensen boys were rolling snowballs too light to stick, their laughter carrying across the dark. Behind me, the laughter inside started again. Forced, thin. I didn't slam the door. I just pulled it shut until I heard the latch catch. The Christmas lights twinkled cheerfully on the eaves, doing their best impression of joy. My breath fogged, then disappeared. I walked to my truck, the snow crunching underfoot. Tomorrow morning, I'd be back. I didn't drive far, just far enough for the house to stop reflecting in the rearview mirror and for the Christmas lights to become a rumor along the highway. I took the first exit with a vacancy sign and a coffee shop that promised it never slept. The motel sat behind a gas station and a shuttered diner, the kind of place that could be anywhere in America and didn't care to be more specific. I parked under a buzzing light, walked past a plastic nativity that had lost its Joseph, and checked in with a night clerk wearing reindeer antlers and boredom. ID and a card, she said, without looking up from her phone. I slid my driver's license across and a visa I keep for emergencies. She handed me a flimsy paper sleeve with a plastic keycard tucked inside, the magnetic stripe already nicked. I thought of the heavy brass keychain at home, the one my wife picked up in Santa Fe because it felt like it had a story. The card here felt like it had an expiration date. Room 214 smelled faintly of bleach and old air. A painting of a sailboat faced a window onto the parking lot. The bedspread was patterned with geometry gone wrong. I placed a keycard on the small desk and set my phone beside it, face down. The heater rattled on and off, like a smoker trying to quit. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark a while, listening to trucks move past in long, measured breaths. Text buzzed. First Claire, we're all sorry for the misunderstanding. Please come back. We can reset the table. Then, Ethan. Dad, that was dramatic. Call me when you're calmer. A few minutes later, you left your garage door remote in the tray. I'll grab it. Then nothing. Then something that wasn't for me at all, an accidental fragment. He'll cave. Followed by, oops. Meant for C and a thumbs up emoji like a band-aid slapped on a fracture. I didn't answer. I watched the red digits on the microwave creep toward midnight. The room made its small motel noises, the compressor's hum, the soft back of throat, whine of pipes, someone above me taking a shower that ended in a bang like a door slammed at the end of a sentence. I have slept in worse places for better reasons. Tonight I wasn't seeking comfort. I was running a test. If I didn't answer, who would keep calling? At 12:17, a voicemail from Ethan. Look, Dad, you know how holiday stress is. Claire didn't mean anything, and about the chair that was optics. You don't care about optics. You've always said so. The word optics hit my ear like a buzzword in a meeting where the decision's already been made. I lay back on the bed, hands behind my head, and let my mind do what it does. Catalog, compare, load bear. I have spent 40 years finding hidden weaknesses in structures that looked fine from the curb. Hairline fractures hide under paint. Joists rot from the inside out. Houses don't fall because of one bad day. They fall because everything that should have been tightened, sealed, reinforced wasn't. A memory came in clean and unwelcome, as tidy as a file folder. 3 years ago, after the Society of Engineers handed me a lifetime achievement plaque, a dinner downtown, white tablecloths and steak, you needed a second mortgage to justify. The waiter poured wine like it was his life's calling. The plaque sat between the bread basket and the butter dish. People said kind things that made me feel like I'd become furniture in my own story. Sturdy, useful, not expected to move. Claire lifted the plaque with 2 fingertips. That's great, Arthur, she said, smiling like a news anchor. But can they be converted into money? There was a little laugh around the table, the nervous kind that checks to see if the line was a joke. Ethan stepped in, quick, charming. She means Dad's worked hard. Now it's our turn to take care of things. He squeezed my shoulder as if to bless me with retirement from relevance. The waiter asked how we liked our meat. The conversation moved on. I led it. Even then, I knew the difference between a moment that needs correction and a moment you think you can sand later. I left that edge rough. More fragments surfaced. The time Claire called the house a great asset to leverage. The time Ethan borrowed my truck for a week because brand-wise, his car didn't match a client meeting at a job site. The time I paid for the leak in their condo because the board wasn't responsive, and Ethan had a pitch deck due, and I knew how to fix things and didn't know how not to. My phone vibrated again. We can talk in the morning, Claire wrote. Then, separately, we'll look into options for a care facility near you, if that's what you want. As if care were neutral, as if I had requested it. I typed a response and erased it. Engineers don't argue with water for being wet. They built a different channel. Sometime after 1, I went to the vending machine near the ice. A woman in a hotel polo was mopping the tile as if it had personally wronged her. Merry Christmas, she said, without expectation. You too, I said and meant it. Back in the room, I cracked a bottle of water and sat by the window with the curtain pulled, half closed. The way you do when you want the dark to feel like a companion and not a threat. A semi idled at the far edge of the lot, its running lights a steady heartbeat. I thought about the brass key ring at home, how it had weight and temperature, how it announced itself in your pocket like a vow. I thought about the plastic card on the desk, how it demagnetizes when you hold it too close to your phone. Where did I go wrong? The engineer in me drew a clean diagram. I provided. Because that is what men of my generation were told. Makes a good father. I quieted my opinions when Ethan's confidence needed room to stretch. I mistook being generous for being clear. My silence padded the edges of their entitlement until it felt like upholstery. I taught them, without meaning to, that my contributions were infrastructure important. Yes, but invisible. You don't thank the beams. You hang lights from them and call it your theme. The heater clicked off. The room settled, empty and lost, gave way to something that wasn't bitter so much as precise. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. I could name its angles. At 2:58, I stood and stretched. The sky had gone from black to the deeper blue that suggests dawn is thinking about it. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I paused on Ethan's name. Then I kept scrolling. The problem is the structure, I reminded myself, not the storm. I have spent my life strengthening beams before they failed. This one is beyond reinforcement. It needs demolition with a plan for what rises in its place. At exactly 3 a.m., I tapped a different name. An old friend. Not a drinking buddy, not a neighbor who would disc and take notes for his wife. A man who owed me exactly one favor from another lifetime, and whose work, when he does it, leaves paperwork sturdy enough to hold up in bad weather. He picked up on the second ring, voice rough with sleep and recognition. Arthur, I need to rebuild something, I said, steady, from scratch. He didn't ask what. He asked, how soon? Sunrise, I said. I'm coming back in the morning. By dawn, the sky had the color of wet cement gray, heavy, undecided. I slept maybe an hour. It didn't matter. My mind was clearer than it had been in years. The world outside the motel window was a network of plans waiting to be drawn. At 6:30 a.m., I found myself in a diner that smelled of coffee and fried oil and second chances. A waitress with tired eyes poured my cup before I even asked. Across from me sat Dave Whitaker, retired locksmith, widower, and the kind of man who still carried a pocket knife sharp enough to open a can of peaches. He looked at me the way old friends do when they already know the outline but not the details. So, he said, stirring his coffee, tell me what happened. I did. Not the dramatics, not the yelling, just the facts. The dinner, the chair, the word useless, the silence that followed it. Dave leaned back, the vinyl seat creaking beneath him. I saw Ethan growing up, Arthur, he said finally. But I also saw the way he talked to you at the barbecue last summer, like you were his gardener. I was about to say something, but I stopped. Didn't want to cause a scene. He shook his head slowly. I shouldn't have kept quiet. It's a pattern, I said. Not a mistake. He nodded. So, what's the plan? I took a long sip of coffee. I'm going to take back my house. Dave smiled tight, approving. Now that's the Arthur I remember. He didn't ask for proof or logic. He didn't need to. Men like us don't argue when another man decides to fix what's broken. We just find the right tools. At 8 o'clock sharp, I called a moving company I'd used years ago on a warehouse job. A man named Tony answered, voice thick with New Jersey fatigue. I need 2 of your strongest men, I said. Were we moving? Not packing, I corrected. Just relocating a few items out of a house. Today, Tony whistled low. Tight turnaround. You paying cash? Yes. Address? Not yet. I'll call with it in an hour. Got it. I'll send Ricky and Mo. They don't ask questions. Good, I said. Neither do I. I ended the call and finished my coffee. Dave was watching me with that locksmith expression, part curiosity, part quiet pride. You'll need new locks, he said. Deadbolts. Something sturdy. None of that Home Depot junk. I was thinking the same. By 9, I was at the bank. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for 2 SUVs dusted with frost. The same manager I'd known for years greeted me with a careful smile. Merry Christmas Eve, Mr. Langford. You're up early. I don't sleep much lately. She nodded, polite enough not to ask. I withdrew a thick envelope of cash and retrieved my safe deposit box. Inside were 30 years of quiet diligence insurance papers, certificates, my wife's wedding ring, and most importantly, the deed to the house. Ethan's name wasn't on it. It never had been. I placed the papers in a brown folder, signed the log, and left. Outside, the sun had burned through the fog, but the light was cold. At a hardware store near the interstate, a bell jingled as I stepped in. The air smelled of sawdust and galvanized steel. A young clerk looked up from the counter. Morning, sir. What can I get you? Locks, I said. Grade 1 deadbolts, 4 of them, and a set of reinforced strike plates. He nodded, impressed. You know your stuff. Used to build houses, I replied. Still do, by the sound of it, he said. While he packed the items into a bag, I picked up a small sign near the register, private property. No trespassing. I added it to the pile. As he handed me the receipt, he grinned. Somebody giving you trouble? Not for long, I said. By mid-morning, I was back on the road. My pickup hummed like an old friend who knew better than to ask questions. The brown folder sat on the passenger seat beside the logs and a thermos of diner coffee. I stopped once to call my lawyer, an old colleague who owed me more than one favor. Arthur, he said, yawning into the phone. What can I do for you at this ungodly hour? You remember the license to occupy document you drew up 3 years ago? Of course. That was for your son, right? You wanted it in writing that he was a guest, not a co-owner. That's the one. I need confirmation it's still valid. It is. You both signed it, notarized, and everything. Why? Because today, I said, I'm enforcing it. There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. I always said you were the most methodical man I knew. Still am. At 11:33, vehicles met at the corner of Sycamore and Vale, the old neighborhood intersection where kids used to sell lemonade in summer. My pickup, Dave's dentist sedan, and a white moving truck with fast-track movers stenciled on the side. Tony's men stepped out first, Ricky, broad as a refrigerator, and Mo, wiry but fast. Both wore gloves and neutral expressions. Dave leaned on his cane, nodding toward the truck. You sure about this? I'm not angry anymore, I said. Just ready. 11 I O May E I E I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I. He smiled. Then let's do it right. I handed him the new locks. You handle the doors. I'll handle the paperwork. The movers waited for instruction. I unfolded a printed layout of the house. Old blueprints I'd drawn decades ago. We'll start with the big pieces, the furniture they brought in. Not mine. Keep it neat. No damage. Stack it all on the lawn. Got it, boss, said Ricky. Dave grinned at the word boss. Feels like we're back on a job site. In a way, we are, I said. Just rebuilding the foundation. He opened his trunk and pulled out his old locksmith kit, a worn leather roll filled with picks, screwdrivers, and the smell of metal and oil. I'll have the lock swapped in under 15 minutes. Perfect. The three vehicles idled quietly, engines purring like restrained energy. The December air was sharp enough to sting. I looked down the street at my house, the house I built, maintained, protected. The lights still twinkled faintly through the windows, unaware of what was coming. For the first time in years, I felt not old, not weary, but certain. The plan was no longer an idea on paper. It had wheels, engines, and hands ready to work. My small army waited for my signal. Let's go, I said. It's time to reclaim what's mine. The street was still wet from last night's rain, the air sharp enough to sting. The neighborhood was just waking dogs, barking, sprinklers ticking, but for us, it might as well have been a construction site at full tilt. Dave stepped out of his sedan with his locksmith's bag swinging from his hand. The movers climbed down from their truck, cracking their knuckles, waiting for the signal. I stood on the curb, eyes fixed on the house that used to be mine in more than just paperwork. The Christmas lights still blinked cheerfully across the porch, oblivious. Ready? Dave asked. Let's begin, I said. He crouched at the front door and unrolled his tools. The sound of the drill biting into metal was small, deliberate, and final. In less than a minute, the deadbolt gave way with a soft click. The door swung open. Ethan and Claire were sitting in the living room, wrapped in expensive matching pajamas, mugs of coffee steaming on the table. They looked like an advertisement for domestic bliss until reality walked in. Ethan jumped to his feet. What the hell? What are you doing? Why are you bringing strangers into my house? Claire's voice pitched high, almost shrill. Arthur, are you crazy? Call the police, Ethan. Call them now. I stepped forward, calm as if I were inspecting a site. No need, I said, handing Ethan a folded sheet of paper. You don't live here anymore. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings. We'll help with the rest. Ethan snatched the paper, scanning it. His face paled. You can't do this. This is my house. No, I said, meeting his eyes. This is my home. You were just a guest, and now the guest has outstayed his welcome. He looked down again, reading the bold header, License to Occupy Revocation Notice. His signature stared back at him, dated 3 years earlier. Claire's voice cracked. You're insane. You can't just evict your own son. Dave stepped beside me, his calm voice a quiet shield. Ma'am, the paperwork's solid. You signed as witness. This isn't eviction. It's repossession. Start, I told the movers. They didn't hesitate. Ricky and Mo entered like a demolition crew, with manners quick, precise, efficient. Within moments, the rhythm of removal began. Furniture scraped, drawers emptied, boxes filled. The house echoed with the sound of consequence. Ethan tried to block one of them at the hallway. "Don't touch that. That's ours." Ricky paused, polite but unmoved. "Boss?" he asked me. "If it was brought in after October, it's theirs. Otherwise, it stays," I said. "Measure twice, move once." They resumed. Claire rushed toward me, tears streaking her face. "Arthur, please! We're family. You can't embarrass us like this." I didn't look at her. "Family doesn't call you useless in your own home." She stared at me, stunned by the calm. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "No," I said. "This is maintenance. Long overdue." The fronton, they've been outside. Furniture began to pile up on the long designer chairs, suitcases, boxes labeled holiday china and golf gear. The movers stacked everything neatly, like they were staging an exhibit called Consequences of Entitlement. Neighbors began to gather. Mrs. Gable from next door stepped onto her porch, rope tied tight, phone in hand, not peeking this time, filming. Across the street, Mr. Peterson leaned on his mailbox, shaking his head slowly. The same man who once asked to borrow my ladder now watched my son lose everything built on mine. Ethan was on the phone, pacing. "I'm calling my lawyer. He'll fix this." The movers ignored him. Mo unplugged the espresso machine. Ricky carried out a stack of framed photos, faces smiling from vacations they never paid for. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up, lights flashing lazily. A young officer stepped out, hand resting casually on his belt. "What's going on here?" Claire rushed to him. "Officer, he's throwing us out of our own house. Look at this madness." The officer turned to me. "Sir?" I handed him the folder. "I'm Arthur Langford, owner of this property. My son and his wife were temporary occupants under a signed agreement. They violated its terms. I'm exercising my right to revoke their access." The officer flipped through the papers, brows lifting slightly. He turned to Ethan. "Sir, according to this, you're not the legal resident here. This looks like a civil matter. My advice? Pack up and leave peacefully." Ethan's mouth fell open. Claire made a choking noise. "You can't be serious." The officer shrugged. "He's within his rights." He turned back to me. "Everything looks clean here, Mr. Langford. Just keep it civil. We're professionals," I said. The cruiser pulled away. Ethan slumped onto the steps, running his hands through his hair. "Dad, we have nowhere to go." I looked at him, really looked, and saw not malice but weakness. The kind of weakness that grows in comfort too long unchallenged. "Then you'll figure it out," I said. "You're resourceful. You told me that once." By noon, the movers were done. The last box landed on the damp grass. Claire's luxury handbag slumped next to Ethan's golf clubs, symbols of a lifestyle too fragile to stand on its own. I signed the mover's invoice, tipped them in cash, and nodded toward the driveway. "Job well done." Dave handed me the new set of keys. "All secure," he said quietly. Ethan and Claire stood in the yard, shivering under the pale winter sun, watching as I closed the new door. Inside, the silence returned clean, empty, absolute. Looking out at the pile of their belongings, I didn't feel triumph. Just the heavy relief of something necessary. Like finishing a difficult repair, sometimes you have to cut away the rotted beam to save the house. And this morning, the structure finally stood on its own again. The house was quiet again. Not the strained kind of quiet that fills the pauses between arguments, but a deep, still quiet that made every sound a ticking clock. A sigh of the heater feel deliberate. Outside, the December light was thin and white, brushing against the frost on the windows. The air still smelled faintly of furniture polish and adrenaline. The movers were gone. Dave had gone home. Ethan and Claire were somewhere out there. In the cold, their voices and perfume and entitlement finally erased from the walls. I stood in the center of the living room, listening to the echo of my own footsteps. The floorboards creaked the same way they always had, but the sound no longer annoyed me. For the first time in years, the house sounded like itself again. On the mantel, the digital clock blinked 3:45 p.m. A single voicemail alert blinked on my phone. Then another. Then another. I set the phone on the coffee table and watched it vibrate with every message. When it finally stilled, I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the empty room hoarse, trembling, and furious. You ruined us. Ruined everything. Just because of one stupid word. Claire left. I'm in some cheap motel off the highway. I have nothing left. Are you happy? You cruel, selfish, old man. I hope you die alone in that damn house. She's go all the phone. The message ended with static, then silence. I sat down slowly, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't feel anger, not even sorrow, only a kind of tired mercy. The way you feel when you've done something painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone. The phone rang again. This time, it was my sister Ellen. She didn't waste time. I just heard, she said. Arthur, what on earth have you done? I fixed something that was falling apart, I said. By throwing your own son into the street? At Christmas? I looked around the room, the half-empty bookshelves, the vacuum lines on the carpet, the faint imprint of where his modern couch used to sit. I gave him every chance to respect what he had, I said quietly. He mistook kindness for weakness. There was a long pause. You've always been the builder, she said finally. You never could stand watching something collapse. I just rebuilt, I said, from the ground up. Ellen sighed. I hope one day he understands that. So do I said. When the call ended, I set the phone aside and sat for a long time. The winter sun drifted lower, painting the walls in a soft amber glow. Dust motes turned in the light like tiny ghosts. Then I stood. There was work to do. The armchair old Bessie still sat awkwardly in the corner where Claire had exiled it. I gripped its worn arms and dragged it back across the floor to its rightful place near the fireplace. The leather groaned, the wood legs scraped, but when I stepped back, the room looked right again. Balanced, honest, that small act broke the spell. I opened the curtains, letting the late afternoon light flood in. Then the windows, cold air rushed through, crisp and clean. I found the broom, swept the hallway, dusted the mantel, wiped the glass on the framed photo of my wife smiling in her garden. The rhythm of cleaning felt like a conversation I hadn't had in years. By evening, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a workshop, bare, quiet, ready. I made myself dinner. A simple bowl of soup, eaten standing at the counter. The silence around me wasn't loneliness anymore. It was stillness, a space waiting to be filled with something new. Later, I called Dave. Dinner here, Saturday, I said. Bring your sister and anyone else who wants a meal that doesn't come from a microwave. He laughed. Back to hosting again? Back to living, I said. A few weeks passed. The snow melted, leaving the yard soft and patchy. I spent my mornings fixing what time had ignored, tightening door hinges, repainting the front steps, pruning the hedges my wife had once fussed over. One afternoon, while I was in the garden, trimming dead branches, a car slowed at the curb, a black sedan. The window rolled down, and Claire's face appeared. She didn't get out. She just looked at me for a long moment. No makeup this time. No arrogance either. Just exhaustion and something else. Maybe regret. Maybe understanding. We didn't speak. I raised my hand slightly in acknowledgement. She nodded once, eyes glistening, then drove away. I watched the car disappear around the corner, the sound of the engine fading to quiet. In her eyes, I hadn't seen hatred anymore. Just weariness, and perhaps a little bit of belated understanding. That night, I sat in old Bessie again, a mug of coffee warming my hands. The house creaked. The wind whistled through the eaves. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It didn't accuse. It simply was. The quiet in the house was no longer emptiness, it was stillness. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts, and they weren't filled with regret or anger. They were simply mine. Outside, the lights along the porch flickered softly in the dark. Inside, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the warmth from the fireplace settle over me like an answer. I had my home back, and slowly, I was learning how to live in it again. By the end of that week, the story had escaped the boundaries of my quiet street. In small towns, news doesn't travel, it seeps. It slips between grocery aisles, into book club meetings, across church pews. By Friday, Arthur Langford threw his own son out on Christmas, had been reshaped, retold, and reheated enough times to feed half the county. The phone rang constantly for 2 days. Old friends called to check in, their tone carefully neutral, like diplomats on foreign soil. Some were curious, others quietly judgmental. You could have just talked it through, one cousin said. I did, I replied, for 20 years. Eventually, I stopped answering. The house felt calm again without the intrusion of speculation. But peace, I learned, isn't immune to the grocery store. It was a Tuesday morning when I ran into Mrs. Gable at the supermarket. She was leaning over the cantaloupes, lips pursed like she was deciding which one held the juiciest rumor. She spotted me immediately and came gliding over, cart first, smile second. Oh, Arthur, she said, drawing out the name like a sigh. I heard the story. It's terrible. Poor Ethan and Claire out on the streets right after Christmas. Whatever happened, he's still your son. There it was, the soft blade of small town sympathy sharpened on judgment. I picked up a loaf of bread, placed it in my cart, and looked her in the eye. Mrs. Gable, I said kindly, if you hear any more stories about me, I'd appreciate a copy. I'd like to know how it ends. Her smile faltered. Oh, I didn't mean... I know, I said, turning down the next aisle. No one ever does, quite. That night, I sat by the fire with a book open but unread. The public noise had faded, replaced by something quieter, and awareness of how people see you once you stop playing the part they expect. In their eyes, I wasn't a man reclaiming his dignity. I was a scandal, a cautionary tale. Then, on Thursday afternoon, the phone rang again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but the name on the screen stopped me. Mr. Peterson, Claire's father. We'd never been close, but I respected him, an old carpenter with hands like sandpaper and a heart too soft for the world he'd built in. Arthur, he said, voice low and gravelly. I'm not calling to blame you. I'm calling to apologize. I sat up. For what? For knowing, he said simply, and saying nothing. He exhaled, and I could hear the sound of a man dragging guilt through a phone line. I've seen how my daughter and Ethan talked to you over the years, the way they treated the house like it was already theirs. I told myself it wasn't my place, but I remember what Claire used to say when she thought no one could hear. She'd tell her friends, just be patient, it'll all be ours someday. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling like dust. I suspected as much, I said. He gave a tired laugh. She called me last week, crying, spinning some tale about a cruel old man who lost his mind. I almost believed her. Then I remember how she used to talk about you, about your assets. That's what she called them. Not your home, not your legacy, assets. Silence stretched between us. Arthur, he said finally, you did what I didn't have the courage to do. You stopped them before they destroyed something decent. I just wish I'd spoken up sooner. Thank you, I said softly. You don't know how much that means. I think I do, he said. Merry Christmas, Arthur. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. When the call ended, I sat in the fading light, thinking about the cracks. I hadn't seen the way small acts of selfishness can settle into the foundation of a family until one day, the whole thing lists. I realized this wasn't just about inheritance or pride, it was about patterns. And mine had finally been broken. Later that evening, Dave came by with a six-pack and 2 glasses. He didn't say much, just handed me a beer and nodded toward the armchair. Looks right where it belongs, he said. We sat by the fire in comfortable silence. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed, then quiet again. I raised my glass. To good foundations, I said. Dave smiled. And stronger beams. We drank. The house, for the first time in a long while, didn't feel haunted, it felt lived in. The next morning, I walked out to the porch with my coffee. Across the street, Mrs. Gable was pretending to water her plants, sneaking glances my way. I waved. She looked startled, then awkwardly waved back. Let them talk, I thought. Let them fill the silence with their stories. Because I finally knew the truth of mine, and for once, that was enough. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? For the first time in years, I woke up to real quiet, no phones buzzing, no footsteps overhead, no tension hiding under the smell of coffee. The house held itself steady now. Even the walls seemed to breathe easier. That morning, I was out in the barn, clearing cobwebs from the old tool bench. Dust motes danced in the cold slant of sunlight, landing on forgotten boxes labeled Eleanor's Garden Tools and Christmas 1997. The barn smelled like linseed oil and cedar honest smells, the kind that never lie. I found a few of my wife's old sketches from her landscaping days, curling at the edges. She'd drawn plans for flower beds, scribbling in the margins. Southside needs more light. I smiled. It was the kind of small, quiet correction I missed most about her. I was sweeping when my phone buzzed. The screen showed a message from my lawyer, Paul Givens. Subject, look, concerning your son. My stomach tightened, but I opened it. Paul's note was short. Author, just received this letter from opposing counsel. Don't panic. It's a bluff. Call me when you can. Below it was the forwarded letter. The first line made my jaw clench. Dear Mr. Givens, my client, Mr. Ethan Vance, believes that his father's recent actions were the result of impaired cognitive capacity and undue influence from third parties. We are considering requesting a mandatory mental health evaluation and court appointment of a guardian of the estate of Mr. Arthur Vance. I read it twice, then once more slowly. Even in exile, Ethan had found a way to insult me, to reduce decades of logic, planning, and labor into a mental lapse. He wasn't trying to win, he was trying to tarnish. For a long minute, I just stood there, the broom handle in my hands, the barn still around me. Then, as the initial sting faded, I began to feel something clearer, an old instinct, familiar and sharp. This wasn't panic. This was alertness. I called Paul. Arthur. He answered immediately, his tone calm, almost amused. Before you say anything, don't worry. This is a standard scare tactic. They have no basis, no doctor, no evidence, nothing. They're hoping you'll be scared into negotiating. Drew, negotiating what? Your will, he said simply. Your assets. They're betting on your love for them. That word, love, sat heavy in my ear. Paul, I said after a moment, make an appointment. I want to come in tomorrow. Of course, but you sound awfully calm. I've spent 40 years strengthening weak foundations, I said. It's time I reinforce my own. The next day, I drove to Paul's office downtown. The reception area smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. A Christmas wreath still hung crookedly on the glass door. Paul met me with that same lawyer's handshake firm, professional, practice empathy. He led me into his office, closing the door behind us. So, he said, gesturing for me to sit, what's the next step in the Arthur Langford master plan? I want to make sure that when I'm gone, I said, this house, this land, every tool and dollar I've worked for will not ever fall into Ethan or Claire's hands. Not a penny. Paul nodded, scribbling notes. Then we're talking about an irrevocable trust. You transfer ownership of all major assets out of your personal name. Once it's done, no one, not even your son, can contest it. You'd need to choose a beneficiary though, family or institution. Not family, I said, without hesitation. He looked up, curious. Then who? I thought of Eleanor's drawings in the barn, of the evenings she'd sit by the kitchen window, teaching Ethan geometry with sugar packets and coffee spoons. You can build anything, she used to tell him, if you respect the math. I want to establish a scholarship, I said finally, for engineering students, at my old university. Name it after her, the Eleanor Vance Foundation for Applied Design. Paul smiled. That's poetic justice, Arthur. Turning anger into legacy. Not anger, I said. Correction. My legacy won't be a house to fight over. It'll be a door for someone else to walk through. When the papers were ready, Paul slid them across the desk. The ink smelled faintly of permanence. I read each line carefully terms, trustees, clauses of protection. Then I signed. One slow, steady signature. It was an oddly quiet victory. No audience, no confrontation, just paper, pen, and intent. When it was done, Paul gathered the documents. Congratulations, he said. Your estate is officially lawsuit proof, and, more importantly, future proof. I nodded. Good. Let them write their letters. They can't touch what they never valued. Outside, the city lights blinked against the early dusk. I drove home through a light drizzle, the wipers ticking like a metronome. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked steady again. Nothing dramatic, just quietly unshakable. Inside, the armchair waited, the fire half burned down. I sat, poured myself a drink, and looked at the empty space where their things once cluttered the floor. My revenge was over. My protection had begun. Ethan could call his lawyers, invent stories, or rewrite history. But he would never rewrite this. Eleanor's name would live where his greed couldn't reach. That night, I raised my glass toward the dark window and whispered, "We built it right this time, love." And for the first time, the reflection looking back at me didn't seem alone. Arthur first heard about Ethan and Claire's new life from Mr. Peterson. The call came on a gray Thursday morning, just as Arthur was oiling the hinges of the barn door. "Arthur," Peterson began, his voice heavy. "She's back." "Claire? Moved in with me last week. Says it's temporary, but..." He sighed. "You know how that goes." Arthur didn't answer. "I thought you should know," Peterson continued. "She told me everything well, her version. But I can read between the lines. The life they built was just a house of cards, and the first rain washed it all away. As a pre-vote," Arthur closed his eyes, listening as the hammer of inevitability fell one more time. He wasn't happy, exactly, but neither was he surprised. A structure built on a weak foundation will always collapse. That's not cruelty, it's physics. Across town, in a rental complex that smelled faintly of mildew and reheated takeout, Ethan and Claire Vance were discovering the true weight of gravity. The apartment was small, one bedroom, thin walls, furniture that looked borrowed from a waiting room. The living room window faced a brick wall, and the air conditioner rattled whenever the neighbors slammed their door. Bills were piled on the kitchen table. Unpaid credit cards, overdue utilities, a final notice from a storage unit company. Claire sat at the table, her hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, staring at a grocery receipt. "We can't keep eating like this," she said, flicking the paper toward Ethan. "Instant noodles? It's embarrassing." Ethan didn't look up from his laptop. "You think I don't know that? I'm trying to find a job that pays more than minimum wage." She snorted. "You had a good job, Ethan. Marketing director. Remember? What happened to that?" He slammed the laptop shut. "What happened? Your friend Julian happened. When you told him to restructure the budget, he restructured me right out of a paycheck." Claire crossed her arms. "Don't blame me for your failures. You're the one who humiliated your father. You couldn't just smile and wait like we planned? Useless? Nursing home? Do you have to say those words, Ethan?" He groaned, rubbing his temples. "Your plan? That was your plan. Impress your parents. Live a good life. Play the part. I'm so tired of acting. You're the one who pushed me to do it." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't you dare put this on me. Everything I did for us. I was patient. I played nice. I thought we were building something. But no, you had to play tough guy in front of your father. Now look at us living like college kids in the dump." The argument bounced off the narrow walls, sharp and echoing. Ethan stood up, pacing the room. "I did everything for him," he muttered. "The company, the house, the dinners, everything was about earning his respect. But he never saw it. Not once." Claire laughed bitterly. "Earning? You mean waiting for him to die?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan turned, staring at her. "What did you just say?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Don't act shocked. You knew what I meant. We both knew he wouldn't live forever. We were just planning ahead." He stepped closer, his face pale. "So that's what it was for you, not a marriage. A strategy." Claire didn't flinch. "Don't you dare judge me. You were happy to play along as the money kept coming. The moment it stopped, suddenly I'm the villain?" "I lost everything," he shouted. "You lost your mask," she shot back. The next morning, the apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Claire stood by the door with a suitcase. "I'm going back to my father's," she said flatly. "He still thinks I'm worth saving. You should try finding someone who thinks the same about you." Ethan didn't look up from the couch. "You'll be back." She didn't answer. The door closed behind her with the soft finality of something breaking for good. 2 weeks later, Mr. Peterson's voice on the phone was tired but gentler. "Claire's calmer now," he said. "She's helping me around the house. Says she's done with Ethan for good." Arthur said nothing for a while. "And Ethan?" "Word is, he's been staying at a motel near the highway. Missed 2 rent payments already. A friend saw him applying for temp work. Arthur, I think he's finally learning." Arthur nodded slowly, staring out at the garden. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. "Learning or breaking," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's the same process." Later that evening, Arthur sat in his armchair by the fire, turning the conversation over in his mind. He wasn't proud of their suffering, but he wasn't sorry either. Their fall hadn't been engineered, it was self-inflicted. He had only stopped shielding them from consequences that had been waiting all along. The radio murmured softly in the background, the jazz station, the kind Eleanor used to love. He closed his eyes, letting the rhythm fill the spaces that once held shouting, demands, and guilt. For the first time, he didn't imagine Ethan as his son, but as a man he used to know. A man who'd mistaken inheritance for identity. He exhaled, long and slow. "A weak foundation," he said aloud, as if explaining it to a class. "It always gives way eventually." Outside, the rain began to fall again, steady, cleansing, and indifferent. And somewhere in the dim motel room miles away, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the flickering TV, realizing the same truth too late. The cracks had finally reached the last beam, and this time, there was no one left to repair it. By autumn, the park had turned gold and quiet. The air smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves, and Arthur had made a habit of sitting on his favorite bench each afternoon, reading as the ducks argued over breadcrumbs. That day, he was halfway through a book when a familiar voice broke the stillness. "Dad." He looked up. Ethan stood a few feet away, thinner, older, wearing a jacket that hung loose on his frame. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something smaller hesitation. "May I sit?" Ethan asked. Arthur nodded once. "It's a free country." They sat with a respectful distance between them, silence stretching like old fabric. Finally, Ethan said, "I saw the announcement in the university paper. The Eleanor Vance Scholarship Fund. It's a good thing, Dad." Arthur closed his book but didn't look at him. "That's what your mother would have wanted." Ethan nodded, rubbing his hands together. "I understand now, more than I did then. I don't even know what I came here for. Maybe just to say, I'm sorry for everything." Arthur studied him quietly. The words didn't sound like manipulation. They sounded like exhaustion. "You know about the trust," he said. Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "I do. Mr. Peterson told me. Claire's gone, by the way. Took the car, went back to her father's. I'm working warehouse shifts now. Feels like starting from the basement." He paused. "But I deserved it." Arthur exhaled softly. "An apology can't rebuild a destroyed house, Ethan. It can only clear some of the rubble." Ethan nodded again. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to see if I could face you without flinching." For a moment, neither spoke. Across the pond, a boy tossed a stick into the water, laughing when it refused to sink. "You look older," Arthur said finally. "I feel older." Ethan hesitated. "Do you think people can change?" Arthur's voice was calm. "Change is slow work. Some people do it because they must, others because they're ready. Which are you?" Ethan gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "Ask me in a few years." The nay word died out. Arthur looked at him then, really looked at the gray beginning to show in his son's hair, at the defeat around his eyes. "Your mother's legacy is honor," he said quietly. "I protected it. You chose another path. Now you'll have to walk it." Ethan stood, hands in his pockets. "I understand." He looked toward the pond. "For what it's worth, Dad, I hope the scholarship helps someone better than me." Arthur nodded. "It already has." Ethan turned to go, then stopped. "Thank you for sitting with me." "You're welcome," Arthur said. When he was gone, Arthur opened his book again, though the words blurred for a moment. He wasn't happy, exactly, but the ache that remained was clean, not raw. The curtain had fallen, The stage was empty, and for the first time, the silence between them finally sounded like peace. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The years slip by quietly, the way sunlight moves across the room inch by inch, until suddenly the day is golden. By the time Arthur turned 75, the house no longer echoed. It hummed, not with the footsteps of family, but with the voices of friends, laughter spilling from the kitchen, and the occasional off-key song from Dave when the wine flowed too freely. On that summer afternoon, the garden looked like something Eleanor might have drawn on one of her old sketches, azaleas bursting with color, the wooden deck brushed clean, and the long table covered with a faded checkered cloth. A handful of friends sat around it, plates of food and glasses of iced tea gleaming in the sunday. Arthur poured lemonade for a neighbor's daughter, a bright-eyed girl who loved to ask questions about the old days. "Did you build this house yourself, mister Vance?" she asked, her voice full of awe. Arthur smiled. "No, but I rebuilt it more than once." The guest laughed, not understanding the weight of that truth. When the party ended, he stayed outside to gather the plates. The air had turned warm and still, carrying the smell of cut grass and grilled corn. The laughter of his friends lingered in the yard like the echo of a hymn. He stacked the dishes carefully, a craftsman to the end, and carried them inside. On the hallway table, a new envelope waited, cream-colored, embossed with the crest of his old university. He slid it open with a pocket knife and unfolded the letter. "Dear Mr. Vance, we're proud to inform you that the first recipient of the Eleanor Vance Scholarship graduated this spring with highest honors in civil engineering. She has already accepted a position in sustainable design. She wrote a note for you, which we've enclosed." He unfolded the second page, written in a looping, confident hand. "Mr. Vance, I don't know you, but your wife's name guided me through my toughest year. Thank you for believing in someone you've never met. I promise I'll build things that last. Emily Carter, class of 2028. Arthur read the note twice. Then he smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't lift your mouth so much as soften your heart. He set the letter beside the framed photo of Eleanor on the mantel. "Well, Ellie," he murmured, "looks like the foundation held." A week later, in early December, a small envelope arrived with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. Inside was a simple Christmas card, no printed greeting, just a single line written in blue ink. "Merry Christmas, Dad." Tucked inside was a photo of a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket, eyes half open, reaching toward something unseen. Arthur held the photo for a long time. The child's features were impossible to read the blur of possibility. He didn't feel anger or longing, only a distant ache, like a scar that no longer hurts but remembers being painful. He traced the edge of the photo with his thumb, then slipped it into the drawer of his desk. Beside Eleanor's old fountain pen and the folded paper with the first design sketches for the scholarship seal, he closed the drawer gently. Not thrown away, not displayed, simply kept. That evening, after the dishes were washed and the lights dimmed, Arthur settled into old Bessie, the same armchair that had witnessed every chapter of his life. The fire crackled softly, throwing amber light across the room. On the mantel, the framed photo of Eleanor caught the glow, her smile warm and knowing. He leaned back, the weight of years resting easy on his shoulders. "I used to think I failed as a father," he said aloud. "But I see now you can't control other people's choices. You can only control how you respond to them. And I chose to defend what was right. I chose peace." He took a slow sip of tea, watching the flames lick the logs. The house, once filled with echoes of argument and silence, now pulsed with quiet life, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rhythm of his own steady breathing. Through the window, snow began to fall, soft and soundless, wrapping the yard in white. The lights from the garden cast faint halos in the dark. Arthur smiled again, a small, private thing. He wasn't waiting for a knock on the door, or a phone call that might never come. His story had already found its ending, the kind built not from revenge, but from restoration. The kind where peace isn't a gift, but something earned. Brick by brick, decision by decision. The fire crackled once more, then settled into a steady glow. This house, his house, stood firm, filled with warmth and quiet laughter that would outlast him. And as the night deepened, Arthur Vance, once a father, once a fighter, now simply a man at peace, closed his eyes and let the glow of his home hold him, steady and whole, at last.